Lynn Thompson. An Inland Voyage, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Section 8. On the Sambre Canalised. To Landrecies. In the morning, when we came downstairs, the landlady pointed out to us 2 pails of water behind the street door. "Voilà de l'eau pour vous débarbouiller," says she, and so there we made a shift to wash ourselves, while Madame Gilliard brushed the family boots on the outer doorstep, and Monsieur Hector, whistling cheerily, arranged some small goods for the day's campaign in a portable chest of drawers which formed a part of his baggage. Meanwhile the child was letting off Waterloo crackers all over the floor. I wonder, by the by, what they call Waterloo crackers in France. Perhaps Austerlitz crackers. There is a great deal in the point of view. Do you remember the Frenchman who, travelling by way of Southampton, was put down in Waterloo Station, and had to drive across Waterloo Bridge? He had a mind to go home again, it seems. Pont itself is on the river, but whereas it is 10 minutes' walk from Quartes by dry land, it is 6 weary kilometres by water. We left our bags at the inn, and walked to our canoes through the wet orchards unencumbered. Some of the children were there to see us off, but we were no longer the mysterious beings of the night before. A departure is much less romantic than an unexplained arrival in the golden evening. Although we might be greatly taken at a ghost's first appearance, we should behold him vanish with comparative equanimity. The good folk of the inn at Pont, when we called there for the bags, were overcome with marvelling. At sight of these 2 dainty little boats, with a fluttering Union Jack on each, and all the varnish shining from the sponge, they began to perceive that they had entertained angels unawares. The lady stood upon the bridge, probably lamenting she had charged so little. The son ran to and fro, and called out to the neighbours to enjoy the sight, and we paddled away from quite a crowd of rapt observers. These gentlemen pedlars, indeed! Now you see their quality too late. The whole day was showery, with occasional drenching plumps. We were soaked to the skin, then partially dried in the sun, then soaked once more. But there were some calm intervals, and one, notably, when we were skirting the forest of Mormal, a sinister name to the ear, but a place most gratifying to sight and smell. It looked solemn along the riverside, drooping its boughs into the water, and piling them up aloft into a wall of leaves. What is a forest but a city of nature's own, full of hardy and innocuous living things, where there is nothing dead and nothing made with the hands, but the citizens themselves are the houses and public monuments? There is nothing so much alive and yet so quiet as a woodland. And a pair of people swinging past in canoes feel very small and bustling by comparison. And surely of all smells in the world, the smell of many trees is the sweetest and most fortifying. The sea has a rude, pistolling sort of odour that takes you in the nostrils like snuff, and carries with it a fine sentiment of open water and tall ships. But the smell of a forest, which comes nearest to this in tonic quality, surpasses it by many degrees in the quality of softness. Again, the smell of the sea has little variety, but the smell of a forest is infinitely changeful. It varies with the hour of the day, not in strength merely, but in character, and the different sorts of trees, as you go from one zone of the wood to another, seem to live among different kinds of atmosphere. Usually the resin of the fir predominates, but some woods are more coquettish in their habits, and the breath of the forest of Mormal, as it came aboard upon us that showery afternoon, was perfumed with nothing less delicate than sweetbriar. I wish our way had always lain among woods. Trees are the most civil society. An old oak that has been growing where he stands since before the Reformation, taller than many spires, more stately than the greater part of mountains, and yet a living thing, liable to sicknesses and death, like you and me. Is not that in itself a speaking lesson in history? But acres on acres full of such patriarchs contiguously rooted, their green tops billowing in the wind, their stalwart younglings pushing up about their knees. A whole forest, healthy and beautiful, giving color to the light, giving perfume to the air. What is this but the most imposing piece in nature's repertory? Heine wished to lie like Merlin under the oaks of Brocéliande. I should not be satisfied with one tree, but if the wood grew together like a banyan grove, I would be buried under the taproot of the whole. My parts should circulate from oak to oak, and my consciousness should be diffused abroad in all the forest, and give a common heart to that assembly of green spires, so that it also might rejoice in its own loveliness and dignity. I think I feel 1,000 squirrels leaping from bough to bough in my vast mausoleum, and the birds and the winds merrily coursing over its uneven, leafy surface. Alas! the forest of Mormal is only a little bit of a wood, and it was but for a little way that we skirted by its boundaries. And the rest of the time the rain kept coming in squirts and the wind in squalls, until one's heart grew weary of such fitful, scolding weather. It was odd how the showers began when we had to carry the boats over a lock, and must expose our legs. They always did. This is a sort of thing that readily begets a personal feeling against nature. There seems no reason why the shower should not come 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after, unless you suppose an intention to affront you. The Cigarette had a mackintosh which put him more or less above these contrarieties, but I had to bear the brunt uncovered. I began to remember that nature was a woman. My companion, in a rosier temper, listened with great satisfaction to my jeremiads, and ironically concurred. He instanced, as a cognate matter, the action of the tides, which, said he, was altogether designed for the confusion of canoeists, except in so far as it was calculated to minister to a barren vanity on the part of the moon. At the last lock, some little way out of Landrecies, I refused to go any farther, and sat in a drift of rain by the side of the bank to have a reviving pipe. A vivacious old man, whom I take to have been the devil, drew near and questioned me about our journey. In the fullness of my heart I laid bare our plans before him. He said it was the silliest enterprise that ever he heard of. Why, did I not know, he asked me, that it was nothing but locks, 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 the whole way? Not to mention that, at this season of the year, we should find the Oise quite dry. "Get into a train, my little young man," said he, "ay, and go you away home to your parents." I was so astounded at the man's malice that I could only stare at him in silence. A tree would never have spoken to me like this. At last I got out with some words. We had come from Antwerp already, I told him, which was a good long way, and we should do the rest in spite of him. Yes, I said, if there were no other reason, I would do it now, just because he had dared to say we could not. The pleasant old gentleman looked at me sneeringly, made an allusion to my canoe, and marched off, waggling his head. I was still inwardly fuming, when up came a pair of young fellows who imagined I was the Cigarette's servant, on a comparison, I suppose, of my bare jersey with the other's mackintosh, and asked me many questions about my place and my master's character. I said he was a good enough fellow, but had this absurd voyage on the head. "Oh, no, no," said one, "you must not say that. It is not absurd. It is very courageous of him." I believe these were a couple of angels sent to give me heart again. It was truly fortifying to reproduce all the old man's insinuations, as if they were original to me in my character of a malcontent footman, and have them brushed away like so many flies by these admirable young men. When I recounted this affair to the Cigarette, "They must have a curious idea of how English servants behave," says he, dryly, "for you treated me like a brute beast at the lock." I was a good deal mortified, but my temper had suffered, it is a fact. Section 8